This podcast encourages and empowers you to create your own unique real story, develop your own unique real statement, and discover your own unique real self. The power is yours. Good afternoon, Mik Kersten. How are you doing on this wonderful, beautiful afternoon?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Angel.
It's a great pleasure to connect with you. What part of the world are you in right now?
I'm in Vancouver, British Columbia. So it's beautiful. It's a little rainy in the sky, but it's a great place to live and work. So happy to be here. Yeah. I'm happy to be talking to you.
My friend, it was definitely, of my entire trip, one of the most beautiful experiences I had driving through from Calgary to British Columbia. That was just, wow, breathtaking.
Yeah, it is an amazing part of the world.
It is. Well, do tell me, which of your talents is responsible for us connecting at this specific time in history? Mik? Interesting.
We've got some major things going potentially wrong in the economy. At least I was getting that sense. I've been working, I built this company 10 years ago that was intended to help organizations thrive in what I think is this new age of software that we have today. And starting in the sense of this massive imbalance that we're seeing between what the tech giants can do and how they're able to behave, and then the rest of the economy. So I wrote this book called Project to Product to help organizations get through what turns out to be this really big transition. And if you look at a broader historical context, it actually looks like it's the fifth time in the last 250 years that society has actually gone through such a transition. So the book kind of describes what those transitions, what these technological revolutions are like, where we are in the current one, and then how we can think as professionals, as leaders of organizations, of how we make our careers and our companies thrive through this big and very disruptive age.
That's pretty intriguing. I think you cut out on me for the first part of this. I'm left a bit dangling in this conversation here. So what was the first part you said? My apologies.
Oh, the first part was I think we connected around the fact that I've just written this book that's actually been selling quite well, and I think changing the way that people are thinking about how technology fits into society, especially when we've got this very large imbalance between companies that are great at producing software, producing technology, that are redefining how we live and work. And then we've got the rest, and those are the tech giants, the companies like Apple and Facebook and Google and Amazon and Alibaba. And then we've got the rest of the world's organizations who are trying to catch up. And the book is really about what's happening, where we are in this technological revolution, how it's happened before, and what we can do as individuals and as organizations to plan for a better future.
Now, listening to that, right, I can definitely say that I believe that you have a talent that is analytical based, right? Who did you learn that from, like that mind, that analytical mind?
For me, I guess it happened quite early on, where I immigrated to Canada when we escaped from Poland when I was 9.5 years old. And I got this present. We actually had to, we got through Checkpoint Charlie. I was young. We got through with my parents in this little car. I had no idea we were actually escaping. And we stayed with these people who really took us in and helped us in Belgium, which is where we ended up. And my parents worked there. They worked some odd jobs. They made enough money to get us enough money to go to Canada, and for our they gave us enough time, 6 months, for application to be accepted by Canada and for us to immigrate. And on my birthday, this family who helped us, who was taking us in on the weekends and helping us out, they gave me this basically a glorified calculator, but it was one of the first computers. And I got super interested in programming this thing, right? I wasn't going to school because, we were in transition. So I got very interested in learning how to program this thing. And I think that's probably where my mind started getting more analytical. And as I immigrated to a new country, I couldn't speak English at all, of course, when we first got to Canada. I actually started learning English by translating the programming manual of this computer into into Polish, which was my native tongue, from English
to Polish, yeah.
Wow. So that maybe is where it all started. Maybe it started earlier in the womb or something, but I think that's kind of what I trace it back to. And I've been passionate about technology since then. I've been passionate about how people fit into it. I got my minor in anthropology. So really for me, it's understanding those two things, how technology and how people overlap, and how we can do better on that front than we've been doing, especially as many people are now getting disillusioned about the benefits that technology is driving, especially when its creation is concentrated in just a handful of companies.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, that's beautiful. I love the imagery of the calculator, yes, and you doing the programming, but then I really love the imagery of you having to convert that into Polish. It's like, yeah, you were doing programming on one side, but then you had to program your mind on the other side as well, from the language side of it. Yeah, it's like interfaces. There's the human side of it, and then there's the computer side of it. That is pretty amazing. Why will you continue to repeat the skills of being the guy that is operating in the strengths of your analytical mind?
Yeah, so I think you're right. And reflecting on it, the really interesting thing is that I learned a programming language as a result of this before I learned English, because I was trying to learn this programming language called BASIC at the time. And so I think that kind of, I also, by the way, I guess the other thing that's been always really interesting to me is over time is also just science and scientific thinking. That's always been something that's fascinating to me, is just understanding the world, even when I was younger, through science and through analytical thinking. So that's been one of the things that's kind of carried me through, even as my role in the company. I'm a founder and CEO of a mid-sized company, has transitioned, and I kind of try to apply that same kind of first principle, same kind of scientific thinking to, say, making business decisions, how the company grows and so on, to experimenting with things that we do. And I think I've actually made it part of one of our core values of the company, is that you always validate things incrementally, you learn, and really that kind of growth and learning mindset is, I think, one of the things I always try to, I seek out in others, but I always try to improve myself on as well, is just continually learning. I think it helps having an analytical foundation, but I think that growth and learning mindset, as when we're working in these uncertain times where jobs and careers and companies are changing so quickly, I think more quickly than we've seen for the better part of 50 years. I think those kinds of things can help, because with everything changing, we all have to adapt much more quickly. And so I think all our careers at this stage are a learning game.
Well, do tell me one other thing that you've done consistently over the last 3 years, please.
So the other thing I've done consistently is, I guess the other thing is, I think one thing that we talked about was the analytical thinking. The other thing is this learning, right? Is this growth mindset. And the third thing that I think I've never been able to get away from is, in the end, just working hard and applying myself, right? Is just finding that intersection between my passion, so things that feel like a hobby, and my profession, which is my work. So I kind of put this all into this one umbrella that I call Finding Flow. And there's this incredible book by Michael Csikszentmihalyi, it's very hard to pronounce last name, called Flow. And it talks about the fact that when we're highly engaged in an activity, so it really depends what you like. For some people, they're musicians, right? They find flow when they're up on stage playing music. Some people find it reading. Some people find it writing. Some people find it programming. And I realized, as in my early career as a developer, that it was programming that gave me this feeling of flow. And by the way, this feeling of flow, it's very well documented by psychologists, and it puts you into this heightened awareness. And it gives you this feeling of time stopping to exist. You become so engaged in your activity, your brain stops tracking time the same way. So the thing that I've really learned, especially over the last 3 years, is I was losing my flow. So as the company started growing, my work started changing, my life turned into more meetings, more interactions with customers, and so on. I never found that flow. It sometimes takes a person half an hour to get into their flow. So over the last 3 years, the new thing I've been doing in terms of focusing myself, focusing my hard work and so on, is to find those periods of flow. It's how I was actually able to go from and find the time to write a book while still running the company. So I've been able to apply it to how I manage people and manage the company as well. So I just put in place at the end of December something called Flow Thursdays, where on Thursdays at our company, Tasktop, you can't have a standing meeting. Because for Thursdays, we're trying to make sure that people have as much flow time, as much of that engagement with the work that they're doing as possible. So I think this practice for me for the last few years, it's absolutely, this new one, is helping myself find flow, given all the distractions and notifications and insanity we deal with every day, and helping others as well.
Love it. Amazing audience. You're hearing it live from Mik Kersten, founder and CEO of Tasktop, author of Project to Product. Mik, let's switch gears for a moment. Let me now invite you into my time machine that is surrounded with beautiful, warm, blue Caribbean water. Mik, what is your earliest childhood memory?
My earliest childhood memory? Wow. The one that stands out right now is when my parents, it snowed a lot in Warsaw. That's not quite the memory, but that same day, my parents first put me on these little skis, and I was not used to seeing much snow. And I just remember just the feeling of everything being different, right? The world I was used to, because I think I was 3.5 maybe. It was the first time I was walking around on these little skis, and I felt like my body was interacting with the world differently than it had. It's definitely a memory that absolutely stuck, and I can't think of many other memories from when I was that young at all. And it's interesting. I've always been amazed at how we can augment ourselves with these tools that are external to us, right? Make them a part of ourselves. Now I think about it obviously more in terms of digital tools. Yeah. But yeah, it was getting put on those skis and realizing I could do something completely different.
How do you see that memory connecting to who you are today?
It's absolutely that. It's how we, with effective use of these tools. And of course, we've got these physical tools like skis, like musical equipment. We've got these digital tools now. But it's absolutely that, is that we can be more than we are when we use tools well. But these tools can also get in our way. And it's, today, I've got an 8 and 10-year-old child, for example. I realized how easy it is for these digital tools that we have to actually take us down the wrong path, right? My children are not allowed to use social media because I've absolutely, I think we're starting to see the evidence, even though I've been a technologist all my life. And even though I use social media daily at work, I realize we don't quite have mastery of these tools the same way that we've been able to master a lot of other physical tools. We've not yet mastered and not yet created the social norms we need around some of our digital tools. So the way I apply that whole idea of tools that extend what we are, which I think, again, is one of the most amazing things about being human, to daily work is to help organizations, to help people focus on things, that in the end live up to, say, one of our core values at Tasktop of people's growth, happiness, and productivity. So nurturing that is really what we need all these tools to do. And it's a very slippery slope with, I think, where we are in terms of all of these new tools that we have today.
Are you going to say pun intended, slippery slope?
Yeah.
Well, can I offer an interpretation to the thought picture you created in my mind with that memory?
Absolutely.
I love the learning curve that goes with your interaction of flow. Definitely when we describe what it takes in terms of being in task with the thing you love and doing it like a million times over, like for me with conversations, right? I get into flow, but keeping in mind that the beginning is always the beginning, and the learning curve that goes with it is one to be interacted with. So to see you put on those skis and definitely feel the difference, but still understanding that there's a learning path that goes with it. But then what is really fascinating about that memory is that now you're helping others, even with Thursday Flow, right? You're helping others understand that. And that, my friend, is very beautiful.
Thank you. And I think you touch on, I think, such an important aspect of finding flow, because if we're in, you asked me for that memory, which is just fascinating for me to recall that. Now that I've recalled it, I realized that was not an easy moment for me, right? I was very challenged by having these appendages on my feet. It was extremely difficult to move. But it was also amazing. And I think the amazing thing about Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's talk, and you can look it up there's a TED Talk on it, is that he points out that if we're in an overly relaxed state, or if we're overly controlled, we don't actually get into that flow state. We need to be somewhere closer to being challenged, closer to what he calls mental arousal, in order to actually enter the flow, which, as you said, you will actually experience that when you're having an interesting conversation. You get very focused. You're not in a mode of relaxation or apathy or anything of that sort. So I think that's the other key thing is it's so important that when we seek flow, and this is what I tell our teams, is you're taking that growth mindset, you're challenging yourself, right? You're working harder than you have before. You're exploring something you haven't explored before, or doing something new when you're not in your comfort zone. And it's just fascinating to me. Again, I think in terms of the principles I apply is that I need to actively work to keep myself out of that comfort zone in order to keep finding and entering that flow. Right. And when you do, it's amazing, right? It's just like when you finished a fascinating conversation, you feel like you're more than you were when you started.
Definitely. Love it. If we fast forward, Mik, to when you were 12 years old, what was your favorite song?
My favorite song?
Yeah.
Oh, my favorite. That was kind of when I was transitioning between Pink Floyd and it would have still been Pink Floyd, actually.
All right.
So Pink Floyd's Metal album and Echoes was my favorite song that year.
All right. Love it. Love it. All right, my friend. Well, we've arrived at our destination. But before we get off of this time machine, there's a small declaration form. So it's yes or no. We're going to move pretty quickly here. Are you ready, Mik?
I am ready.
Mik, have you chosen someone to pass on your skills to?
Yes, absolutely, I have.
Are you married?
I am married.
You said you have one son, 10 years old at the time of this recording. Do you believe in God?
I do not believe in God. And I have a daughter, an 8 and a 10-year-old daughter.
Oh, sorry. So it's 2 children you have.
Two children, sorry.
All right.
I deeply believe in people, though. So I think we can find God in people.
All right. So you said you have the 2 children. What about the TV? Do you spend 3 hours a day or less than 3 hours a day?
Oh, yeah, I spend much less than 3 hours a day. I don't watch much TV.
All right. What about screen time? The phone and the computer. Is it more than 8 or less than 8 hours a day?
I work. A lot of my work is in screen time. So work, tons of screen time. Some days it'll be 14 hours of writing and doing things at the computer. And less than on non-work things, I try to do almost 0, so call it 10 minutes a day.
All right, Mik, if you had to share with us your own unique real statement, a statement that represents who Mik Kersten is, what would you say?
A seeker of flow and growth and happiness and productivity.
Love it. Can I add something?
Absolutely.
I'll be the guy to ski down the mountain. Mik Kersten, this was a great pleasure. Before you leave, is there anything else you'd like to share with our amazing audience?
I think that's it. I think, hopefully, I think people are finding their own path. Again, I think the world is changing more rapidly than it has in the past. And I think that growth mindset, that challenging of yourself, that learning is more important to both people and organizations than it ever was, because the future is changing from underneath our feet. So, but I think at the same rate, it can be fun, right? If we seek those things, if we seek to learn, this can be a great time and an amazing time as a society comes to grips and moves beyond what we've seen and kind of the directions of unequal distribution of technology and wealth. And I think help us all move towards a place where these technologies and tools, not just the skis, but these digital tools that we have, make the world better for everyone.
Love it, Mik Kersten. Thank you for being on What is Inspired by 12-Minute Convos with Angel Jones.
This segment has been brought to you by Amazel Enterprise.